Hello and welcome back to episode 4 of composing music for movie, TV shows, and video games. In the past few videos, we've gone over some of the basics regarding understanding how our DAW works, how computers can make music, some of the technical stuff we need to know, like DAWs and sample libraries, and some of the gear that we need in order to get started making music. In today's video, we're going to finally get into the exciting stuff of really talking about the music making process. So I want to quickly go over my theory as to how to learn in the most efficient way possible how to start composing music. And my theory goes something like this. I think that getting really good at writing short amount of music and then progressively increasing the amount of music you're creating is the best way to get good quickly, so to speak. It still requires lots of real work and there's no cheating all of the effort that is required here. But I think it's going to be the most efficient way forward, and I think it's going to be the least confusing. Of course, there's still going to be confusing parts along the way, but I think that this is going to be the most helpful. So when it comes to music, it's very helpful to think of music as analogous to language and to writing essays. The structure that goes into writing an essay is very similar that goes into creating a piece of music. You need to have fluid sentences and paragraphs and chapters in order for an essay or a book to make sense, and the same is true with music. So today what we're going to do is begin to take a look at what is the equivalent of a sentence in music, the shortest complete thought that's possible in music. Music is full of these questions and answers and bold statements and timid responses and everything in between. But when it comes to feeling a sense of completeness, there's a couple of things that we really need in order to get that sense that, okay, this is a complete thought. If I say, "The brown fast, go now," that doesn't make any sense. It's not a sentence. And we can do the same thing in music. We can play some notes. If I just leave it at that, we're like, well, what was that? That doesn't feel like a complete thought. Thinking of music in this way of being complete thoughts is going to be really helpful. So the most basic complete thought that we have in music is the 8-bar melody. Now, melody and harmony are completely and totally interwoven. And so that's what today's video is going to be focused on, is this concept of melody and harmony and how they go together and how they're really not separate things. And thinking of them as separate things is probably going to hurt your music making process. But what is melody? And what is harmony? And what is this most basic structure of music? So the equivalent of the sentence in the English language, or whatever language you speak, comes down to this 8-bar melody. And now why is it 8 bars? A lot of that comes with that's just the way things are. And an interesting thing in learning music is that you learn a lot about how much context matters. And the way we've done things in the past really affects how we expect to interpret them now. In other words, when we listen to music, so much of our understanding of the music we're listening to is about what we've heard before, to the point where if we hear something that totally goes against the grain, even if it's technically musically correct, it's not going to sound like pleasing music to our ears. So the 8-bar basic structure for creating music is just sort of one of those, it's kind of hard to describe why it is fully the case, but it just is. So we're going to go with that, and you're going to see over time that this is going to be really useful. As I've said in the past, music can really be broken down into lots of symmetrical pieces. We've got lots of groups of 2, 4, and 8. You're going to see 8 and 4 and 2s everywhere. They are just all over the place. Music is so symmetrical and so geometrical that it's really kind of cool and fun, but when you look at it, you're almost like, well, that's almost too formulaic to sound like music. The 8-bar basic idea, at a medium paced tempo, this is going to give us about 15 seconds of music. So the next couple of videos are really going to be focused on getting this 15-second piece of music down. And we're going to try and get a really good understanding of how to compose a really interesting and complete 15-second piece of music. Now, I know that probably isn't exactly what beginners want to hear. They want to get into writing full 2, 3, 4, 5-minute pieces of music. And we'll get there, I promise. But getting this part down and getting it down well is just going to make the rest of the music making process so much more fun, so much easier. And if you're writing really good melodies and you're starting with really good 8-bar structures, then moving forward from there is going to allow your music to actually sound good. You could get a really elementary understanding of what it is to craft a melody and go from there and learn larger and larger forms of writing music, but you're not going to be pleased with what you're writing. So we might as well just get good at this. So in this first video, what we're going to do is just show you what melody and what harmony are, and then in the next video, we're going to get to actually writing something. once again, we need to take a little bit of a pause and say, okay, what is it we're trying to create in an 8-bar piece of music? If you've never made music before, you're like, I don't know where to start. I don't even understand what making music means. So let's think about what the composers who write music for film, TV shows, and video games commonly do. This is the most common place to start. Now, unfortunately, theme writing is becoming a little bit less common, and the big bombastic themes of John Williams and the like back in the 80s and 90s are a little bit less common in movies nowadays, but it still is a really great place to begin understanding how the music process goes. So what is a melody? Well, I think it's just going to be easier to show you and have you listen than for me to try and explain it with words. So let's hop on over into Ableton, and I'm going to play with the BBC Symphony Orchestra piano. I'm going to play a melody, which I almost guarantee that all of you are going to recognize. So let's take a listen. So that's kind of exciting, isn't it? I mean, right there in an 8-bar piece of music with just a piano, we can recreate the infamous Star Wars main theme, or what many think of as the main theme. I know that sometimes the opening credit theme can be, whatever, not going to get into that. The sort of emotional theme that you think of when you see Luke standing in Tatooine with the two suns in the background. But this is where we start. This is where John Williams starts, is with writing these themes, these 8-bar pieces of music. Now, as we get more advanced, we'll learn that they don't always have to be 8 bars, but to start, we're absolutely going to stick with the 8-bar structure. The structure of this and how to compose interesting melodies is really the place where we get started. But as you can see, we're working here with essentially half notes, quarter notes, a few triplets, but what's going on our computer is not that crazy. We could click in and draw in this amount of notes in just a few minutes. Now, of course, crafting it in such a way that it's memorable is going to take some time, but you can see on your screen before you now, this is what a melody is it's a combination of different pitches and different rhythms, which give you the most memorable thing when it comes to the listening to music. When you think of that scene in Star Wars with Luke standing with the two suns behind him, and you're humming, this is what you're doing. You're doing the That is the main thing that you're thinking of. Now, as we'll see in just a moment, this isn't the entire piece of music, because if the orchestra were to just play this one piece of music, it could create a really cool effect, but it doesn't actually bring out the entire emotional content of the music. Now, what I like to think about with melody is what's going to be a really helpful thing to think about here is a metaphor to painting or a picture. If you're taking a photo of someone, let's say you're taking a portrait, the main focus is the person. But of course, like even in this shot that you're looking at right now, I'm not the only person and I'm not the only thing in the shot. There's my microphone, there's a guitar behind me, there's some soundproofing behind me, there's a wall, there's other things. But you can think of me as the foreground and the rest of that as the background. So in music, essentially, we've got two things going on at any given time for the most part. We've got melody and we've got harmony. We've got foreground and we've got background. There are kind of exceptions to this, but this is really basically what music is for the most part. It's not too complicated. There's just something that we're focusing on, and then there's other elements which help to support it and make it feel complete. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the harmony that goes with this melody on its own. And on its own, it's not going to be recognizable. If I had played that for you first, I almost guarantee that none of you would have been like, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's the Binary Sunset theme. But now when I play them together, listen to how much this adds to the theme regarding the emotional weight and impact that wasn't there the first time you heard it. Now that feels complete to me, and that's got the emotional weight to it. That's beginning to bring up the goosebumps that you get when you hear a really iconic theme that you associate with the movie you love. So harmony is essentially the background. Harmony almost always comes in what we call chords. Now, whereas a melody is usually thought of as one note being played at a time, which is varying in either pitch or length, harmony tends to come in these things called chords, which go most commonly underneath our melody, meaning that they're in a lower register. If you're playing a piano, you would think of playing the melody in your right hand and the chords in your left hand. Of course, there are exceptions. There are exceptions to everything in music. I almost need to stop saying it. But this is what we mean when we say that the harmony comes underneath the melody. A lot of the time when the harmony is in a lower register and the melody's in a higher register, this really helps bring the melody to the foreground, to the attention of the listener. So this is part of why we do this when we're composing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. But this is just showing you, if we're looking at Ableton in front of us, we've got our melody in red here and our harmony in green. And you can see that our melody are these red notes, which are moving a lot faster and a lot more frequently and changing pitch a lot more frequently than our green notes, which represent our harmony. So harmony in chord form is essentially going to be notes that are played simultaneously for, generally speaking, the same amount of time. So that's kind of what we mean when we're talking about melody, is almost always just one note at a time, just moving between pitches and playing for different lengths. When we talk about harmony and we talk about chords, we talk about putting notes underneath the melody to support it and give it emotional weight. Really, what distinguishes this here is that we're not meant to hear the individual notes of a chord. This is the really important part, is that every chord essentially has to have at minimum 3 distinct and unique notes. And underneath a melody, in this case where we've got the C sharp minor, it gives it emotional weight. And then we go to an F sharp major chord, to a G sharp major chord. We're using different chords and different notes that are playing simultaneously to give the melody emotional weight. Now, what's really important to note here is that, particularly when we're getting started, in almost every memorable theme, the vast majority of the notes that you hear in the melody are going to be chord tones. What I mean by this is that they're going to be notes which you find in the chord that you're playing. Melody and harmony completely and utterly go together. It's really hard to separate them, and the more and more you study the two, the more and more you realize that they're completely and utterly intertwined. I think that the painting or the video is going to be the best way of understanding this. Just looking at a painting of just the person and blurring out the whole background and whitening it out or something would really take away. It would be kind of boring. It would just feel sort of out of place and really alone and isolated. Whereas if you removed the foreground and the main, the person who was in the painting, well, all of a sudden there's no longer a painting, it's just a background. And so the same thing is true in music here. So I hope that this is helpful in understanding what harmony is and understanding what melody is. We're going to go over in the next video, we're going to start actually making some melodies and some harmonies. But this is just to show you an idea on the computer of when John Williams starts writing music, this is where he starts a lot of the time, is with the theme. He's trying to come up with the unique group of notes which create both a memorable melody, harmony, which together create what we think of as the theme. It is melody and harmony together, interwoven, that create the themes that we love. One of them is going to feel alone and isolated, but together we get the full, complete sense of having a finished musical thought. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the video is just play 4 more examples from John Williams. The melody is going to be in red, the harmony is going to be in green, so you can see the melody and harmony working together whilst listening. And this is going to really be helpful in understanding what our goal is in next week's video in trying to actually start composing some music. So that is going to be it from me in this video. I hope it was helpful in beginning to see the beginning in composing music for movies, TV shows, and video games. If you found the video helpful or if you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe and leave comments if you have any questions. Until next week, I will catch you all later. Take care.